chat, and also feel free to speak out. Okay. Let me get my chat window up so I can just track that as I present. So, aloha. Again, my name is Corinne. I am a bio artist, art activist, and STEAM educator. And I'm excited that I was brought on right before this Make Week, I guess is what it is nationally, internationally. And so I'm going to be talking about sustainable making from my perspective. And let me see if I can get this to progress. There we go. So I'd like first, I know we just did a check-in, but I would love just to hear from you all. What is your favorite making experience as a child? And I don't do this just as an icebreaker. I find that play is a way for people to connect and to innovate. And I am also the daughter of a toy designer. So play is serious and play is foundational. It's how we connect. So I'm just curious if you could just share one sentence about one of your favorite making experiences as a child, and then pass the question to someone else. And it could be making food, it could be playing a game, it could be making something physical. So I will ask, well, maybe I'll start. I'll say one of my favorite making experience was making seed lays as a child and with my grandma. So I'll pass it on to Julia.
Thank you. It's hard to choose. I actually went to like a preschool where we focused a lot on like doing different kinds of making. So we did that like every day. And we did a lot of different things with pearls. Like, you know, you put it and then you iron it and then you can like hang it up. So I think maybe those were one of my favorite things. Passing it over to Fanny.
Thanks. Oh, I started to think like, oh shit, this is a hard question. But then I started like, yeah, right, we did so much making in school. And now I'm like starting to think about it. It was a lot. And my grandma also is a very good like sewer. So she taught me how to sew when I was super little. But I also enjoy doing things with clay. Like I did this like clay lighting, like ljushållare. What's the English word for it?
Like candles
holder. Yeah. And gave them in like gifts for like holidays. So some grandparents still have those clay light holders and like, oh. So I think the sewing and the clay holder, clay light holder, they're quite like pretty to be made by a child. I can pass it over to Arpina.
I remember that before the new year, sometimes we made the toys that we hang from the Christmas tree, this kind of things. And there is one we made from eggs. Like my father was making a hole and like getting the egg, the inside, everything out. And then we were drawing things on the egg and making some heads and stuff like that. It was funny and I liked it. And I pass to Mahile.
Saravana. Oh yeah, thank you. So my experience also with we used to make those cars when we were like growing up, because growing up at the villages. So our parents didn't have like money to buy us like some toys. We used to like make some nice cars and then we used to drive around and things like that. It was really exciting. I'll pass on to Robert.
So was it Robert or Obed?
It was you, I think. Okay. So you and Barbara can go.
So for me, I really enjoyed mixing anything I could get my hands on in the hopes that I would make something new. So add soil, soap, detergents, lotion, and just mix it all up and try to see what would happen. Yeah.
Well, so I think I posted mine in the chat because I think that's the most memorable one because I'd get attached to them and I'd keep them for a very long time. Yeah, and over to Apine.
I spoke already.
Oh, over to Yulia. I also spoke.
I can go.
Yeah.
Let me go. Okay, go ahead, Ruth.
I have to demonstrate, but please don't look at my background. It's a bit messy. So, yeah, my experience was doing my hair. You see, like the way it's nicely done. I'm not the one who did this, but you know, like the African hair we normally plait. So I really enjoyed doing that. And I used to use like grown grass, very tall grass, and then I would plait the grass. And that's how I learned how to plait. But currently I cannot do my hair. So it's such a shame. Over to Rex.
Okay, I think mine is it's back when we were young. We used to use this can, like tins of sardines or tomato. We in there make little cars. We kind of like burst and put a little bit of things around and push as a child. I think that was one of the greatest memory I have making when I was a child growing up. It was really fun, and we used to do car race with such little cars that would make like in starting containers. So I pass it over to who hasn't gone.
I can go.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Well, when I was little, I really loved to play with sand on the playgrounds or anywhere. And I had this very weird habit that I loved to build, well, I called it butter hills, which was like a very long and concrete process of making a hill out of sand. So first I used like more of a wet sand to build the hill. And then I used dry sand, just poured it on the wet sand, which was, for me, it was butter. And like I made like dozens of butter hills on the playground out of sand. So that's what I was doing all day. And I will pass it over to Nelly.
Okay, so my very early childhood memory of making something was probably playing with plasticine and also with sand. If I was indoors, I was playing with plasticine and trying to make some mini toys with that. Also, I remember that we, with other children, were trying to build some houses out of different material and go inside of it, like from canvas, from some wood that we will find somewhere, some stones. So we were constructing a house, like a mini house for children, and we're going into it. And then at school, I was doing embroidery, if that is counted as making. So I was sewing and also doing embroidery, doing some tablecloths, covers for the home. So I think that was, and much more, but I can just recall all these 3 things. And I give the word to Sherry. Sherry, are you here?
Yes, I am. So for me, my early memories of making something was making a kite. I think ever since I learned to make that from paper and sticks and string, like that was one of my easiest and favorite things to make. And then also I used to really love making dresses for my dolls. So I just go and find like old clothes that no one is using anymore and try and cut them up. And I honestly didn't have the best stitching. It was just holding on for dear life, but just as long as it covered my dolls, I think I was just happy. And I also used to play a lot with plasticine, just creating different models and people and just stuff, just creating. It's like I'd create my own city in there and just trying to create a car and people, and this is a house and this is where they go, and just trying to recreate my life in the plasticine. Yeah, I think those are my earliest experiences. Is there anybody who's not spoken?
Olivia is still there.
Yeah, are you still there?
Yeah. I think that someone mentioned doing Christmas ornaments. We did that in my family as well, for the Christmas tree, small hearts and all these things. But my family, there was a lot of arts and crafts. There's also been someone mentioned with the clay and weaving we also did. And but I think one thing that is like that it's also kind of a making is that we played a lot with Lego when I was little and built these big cities and things like that from the Lego, and then took them down and built new things. And I still do that with my son today. I think it's very fun to be, but it really helps with creativity. Lisa, are you around, or did you drop out to an appointment?
Yeah, she has dropped out, unfortunately. Yeah. So back to you, Corinne.
Wonderful. So you all have such rich backgrounds in making, and I want you to think about your youth if they are having a similar journey, and how we can provide experiences like you all had, where you're using place-based materials, storytelling with what you're making. Those are wonderful. So just really quickly, just the housekeeping. We're going to go over the goals overview. What is sustainable making and why? What frameworks we need in sustainable making. We're going to spend a little bit of time on examples of impactful and sustainable making and lessons learned. And then we'll have 15 minutes at the end to ask questions. But I do encourage you to also just speak out and also ask questions in the chat. So the broad goals that I was shared that you have is to really broaden the diversity of the climate movement and who has a voice in these spaces, and how you can have a voice both locally and globally. And I think I was really excited to see that framing, because I think it's really important to not just try to have global impact, but to really look at local issues. I think it's super important. So I was really grateful to see that in the framing that I was presented. The specific goals that you all offered were sustainable making methodologies. You wanted to see examples of that. How to share making knowledge to other youth through the maker spaces, and to be inspired for the Make Something Week. And then the goal was to do this through seeing and discussing some examples of sustainable making, and I'm going to try to do that with this presentation. And so first, I have been doing maker spaces for probably over 15 years in California, working mostly with agricultural labor youth, and now back home in Hawaii. And I really view sustainable making as really being an interconnection of place, people, and process. And we'll see that as we go into some of the examples. I know that your spaces already touch upon many of these things, because I looked at some of the examples and your presence online. So I appreciate that you do a lot of this uplift multi-generational knowledge, especially when we're talking about biology. We have this ancestral knowledge in our making and storytelling, biological collaborations and kinship across species. And you can read these accessible place-based materials, I think is super essential. And also accessibility, I think, is really important. And I heard some of you talk about braiding grasses to learn how to plait, and to use local clay, and carving soap, and even doing decorations with eggs. That's place-based materials, and it's really important. to incorporate those in our makerspaces. Storytelling, I think, is key, and to have a long lens of ourselves as future ancestors in what we do. That is crucial to sustainability. And all this, of course, is rooted in our ideas of circular design. And I'm just going to leave this here for a second. If anyone wants to put in the chat, is there anything else here that you think belongs? Feel free to add that. And we're going to keep holding these thoughts in our heads as we go forward in this. There's so many things to add here, but these are kind of the main ones I was thinking of. Also want to show some examples. And I use this on the left a lot, the Cameroon Muslim dwellings I do a lot of NASA challenges with youth. And I want them to really see that inspiration comes from ancestral innovation. And these are the most effective designs for self-load bearing soil structures. And this has been referenced in 3D printing for Mars habitats. They're going to use regolith on site because you can't send payloads to Mars or to the moon. And so the greatest innovation for this architecture comes from Cameroon. And I just wanted to highlight that here. And on the right is from where I am, local IAs are innovative fish gate systems that are part of larger land management systems in Hawaii. And so innovation is system design for sustainability, and we can tap into these larger systems conversations when we work with materials. And some of the examples here you see are working with local Hawaiian materials to make dyes and bioplastics. And I see I missed a message. Yes, many adults forget. Thank you for adding that, Olivia. Play is so important because it takes away fear. When you play, you're not fearful. When you play, you know you can iterate. It's not like you do one design and you're done. Like, I did it, I'm done, which you get so much with making. But if you're playing, there's no right or wrong. And I think that's really important. And yes, adults do forget that a lot. And that's why it's really awesome to have makerspaces that elevate youth as co-leaders, because they don't have that fear. We were talking earlier about this in our previous meeting, Fanny and Julia and I, about just the word sustainability. And we're using it because it's just a common word. Everyone knows what it means. But when we use it in our phrasing about sustainable practices in land, it has sort of a negative deficit connotation. And you really see that when you put it in a sentence and ask, is your relationship with your partner sustainable? You would never say that to someone. But if you ask, is your relationship with your partner one of abundance? That's much more positive. And so I think another thing that we can ask in our makerspaces is, how do we move from this capitalistic scarcity model into a model of abundance? And that we can do when we're working with materials of place and practices of place. And why do this? So I really wanted to highlight that there's been research on the value of sustainable making and conversations with youth. So there was this research project. There's a link to it in this slide deck at the bottom. This project was done at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in the United States. It was a summer camp with youth. And it introduced them to climate change concerns and science. And on the right, you can see the graph with the control group at the top and then experiment group at the bottom. And you can see that the change in beliefs, the change in concern by the parents changed afterwards, because youth have impact on their parents. Youth are the voice of trust. They're actually the youth of authority in communities. People don't really think about that. But in a country where I live, where there's a lot of denial of climate change and of science, it's the younger generation, it's the teens that can actually impact and change the view of the parents. And an interesting thing of note from this research is that the daughters had the highest impact on the change of beliefs in their parents. So I just wanted to take note of that. So there's, regardless of what you're doing in your makerspace, if it's engaging in a conversation of climate change and climate issues, it can reach into community if you're working with youth. Now I'm going to talk about methodologies, and I have a link at the bottom of this document, as well as in the link I put earlier in the conversation to this particular article that came out a couple months ago that I co-wrote. And it really talks about breaking down how do we create sustainable spaces, not just sustainable making, because there's so many maker spaces that come and go, and how do we really maintain them from within communities? And I know this has probably been a conversation you all have coming from your many different places of different communities. Some of the key things are having spaces that have generative learning, and generative learning means you're building your definitions of your conversation, of science, of your making practice. You're generating that together. It's not coming as a definition from any one preconceived group. You're not writing definitions on the board. You're building them together. And generative also means maybe you were keeping journals and notes of process and ideas of what words you might use. Playful making, we discussed, is super, super important for adults and youth, and just for pushing innovation conversations, and also being in difficult conversation spaces. It's a safe space. Play is a safe space to bring people together of different thoughts. Reflection and ritual. This is a really important part of the maker spaces I have been a part of, bringing in our cultural rituals and reflections to bring gratitude and honor both gratitude and grief within the community spaces. There's a lot of challenges in all of our spaces, in all our communities. I know some of you came into this meeting with challenges, and we need to be able to bring those into our maker spaces, because they are spaces of community and healing. And ritual can be a part of that. Storytelling, I think, is essential. When we're talking about sustainability and climate justice, whoever tells the stories has the power. The storyteller is the most powerful person in any community. And so the more that we can elevate our youth to be the storytellers, to be the empowered storytellers of their community, locally and globally, just the more impactful that will be. And to just really honor making, but giving people opportunity to storytell the act of their making and the process of their making. And then frugal tool design. Frugal tool design is actually a term that's used. It's a practice that was developed by Manu Prakash at Stanford University, actually in the physics lab. But what it means is to design tools that are effective, but are very, very low cost. So how can you make a community science tool, a data research tool that is very, very inexpensive from very accessible materials? And I'm gonna look at the chat. Maybe this goes under playful making, but I think celebrating trying and failing, yes, and trying is very important. I completely agree with that, Olga. And I think we can highlight the importance of trying and failing when we storytell our playing, like what was the hardest moment of your design? And what was the most fun part? And when you ask that to any participant, sometimes the most fun and the most hard are the same thing. The fail can be fun. And if you're journaling, you can see how that fail was a pivot moment, how it sent you down a different path. And so I think, I don't know if some of you have been design thinking workshops. Sometimes I see workshops where people put post-it notes and they just generate ideas, and it just stays at that point. We need to move beyond that to make models, to test them, to fail, and then pivot. And to really see that process, you have to journal. And so I really believe in the importance of having journals and maker spaces to document our journeys, and for people to really, because it's not the artifact that you make that you continue with, it's the journey. And I loved hearing, I think it was Robert earlier saying his play moments was mixing soap and shampoo and like mixing stuff that he had. And I'm sure you still don't have that. But like every time you did that, that was a learning process, right? It was the journey of that mixing and just that creativity that you had. And yeah, so those are important things. So Olivia, Olga, thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, celebrating trying and failing, and we're gonna have that as we do sustainable making and address climate issues. And then the last thing I want to highlight is social awareness and action. And I know you all are centered in this as well, but making without purpose, I don't think we can really afford that so much anymore. We can have play for play because that actually is driving into, further engineering skills that will help with problem solving future things. And I'll talk about that in some of the projects. But we really want to drive our spaces to be engaged in community and local community issues and global issues. And so that's what that last one is. So I'm going to go over, review 4 different case studies that I thought would be useful. I know it's kind of wild here on the left is working with bio-collaborating with mealworms that can eat plastic, polystyrene. The next one is collaborating with mushroom mycelium, the root-like structure of mushrooms, to see if we can bioremediate fire burn scars on Maui. Root study tools is really to study the 80% of plants that we don't see is the roots underground and help with the ecosystems we're losing locally. And then the last one is sustainable power and dreaming playful biofutures. Okay, so I'll go to the next slide. I can get it to go to the next slide. Okay, there we go. Okay, so Mealworm Chef is my first example, and it is an example of generative learning, storytelling, and play. And I included generative learning because the teens who designed this project came up with the term plastivore, and I'm sure others have come up with that as well. But when you hear it, plastivore means plastic eating, and I just thought they had so many great terms they came up with. So this was a community project that had expression in a science museum in California, and was also designed to be in a community garden in Salinas, California. That component didn't happen because of COVID. But to explain the beginnings of the story, these teens were in a program called BioJam, and they learned from a scientist that waxworms and then mealworms were discovered to be able to eat plastic polystyrene. And this was in 2015. And the students in the camp, this was 2019. And I was shocked at the end of the presentation, the students were angry. They were pissed off that they didn't know about this. So this was research that happened in 2015. And here we are in 2019, and there's the first time they heard about it. And they became aware there's a lot of science happening in the world that is written for science journals, but it doesn't reach the general public. And so they wanted to design a fun workshop for their community to get people engaged in the idea of how can we collaborate with mealworms and their gut bacteria to have a more sustainable future, especially considering all the plastic. And so I want to highlight this example because plastic is often a theme that we have. Well, it's an unavoidable theme because we make so much plastic and the numbers are so high that our eyes just kind of blur. We only recycle 9% of plastic. It's just such a disturbing topic, and it's hard to storytell so we don't glaze over. The numbers don't really mean anything. We don't feel it. But if we change a story from the amount of plastic that we're generating to dreaming about working with organisms that can eat it, that's a different story. And it's exciting, and it makes you linger thinking about it. It's a story that you can anchor in and see yourself contributing to. So this is what the students anchored in on in terms of exploring this project. And they actually did a time lapse as well, where they cut out the word waste and they stuck it in a petri dish with some mealworms and a little bit of apple. The apple was the water. And watched it eat, made a time lapse of them eating. And they wrote the text here that you see. So here's storytelling, sharing out to community. And then here's the workshop, and it was multi-generational. So you have parents with children making these little plastic foods. So the goal was you made mini food from polystyrene, and you got to put marker on it to color it. Maybe it was a wedding cake or a tortilla, taco or something. Then you put it on a big platter with hundreds of mealworms. and they were eating it. And if you could lean in, you could even hear them chewing on the plastic. And so that's what their workshop was. And I don't believe any adult would ever come up with that. It was truly a team design project. And here are some screens. There's also links on here of the student design informational sheets. So their conversation also spread into eating insects. And so all of us come from cultures where we traditionally ate insects. And so we had students that represented many different cultures in this group, and they researched their ancestral practices of eating different insects. And for some of them, they will go back one generation and the family are eating insects. And so it was really great sharing. So that was that first project. And then another one I wanted to share is one I'm working on currently, and it is about frugal science tools, rituals of gratitude, and taking action. And so this particular project is looking at this really big issue here we have in Hawaii, but it's also a global issue with climate change, is the increasing amount of fires that we have and the range of fires. And so in Hawaii, our burn areas across all the islands have expanded in size by 5 times. So they're just since 1980. So just the fires are massive now. And so the project that I'm exploring with youth, Maui, I'm on Oahu, I'm on a different island, and Maui's a sister island that my family's actually from. We're going to explore how to design education programs that explores how to bioremediate fire toxins. So we had a whole city burned to the ground and many people die a couple months ago. And so this project has to be mindful of honoring those who have passed and really place-based knowledge. And so this pilot program is going to be working with teens to develop the curriculum so that it can go to sister islands and expand the knowledge of bioremediation. So right now, most of the people coming to deal with the fire are from the mainland. So we need to grow homegrown knowledge to deal with our home, really specific Hawaii issues. And so we're looking at using the actual fire fuel grass. This grass here, right, you see here, it's called guinea grass, it's invasive. And also Halikoa bean at the bottom left. Those actually can be feedstock. We can feed the mushrooms that can bioremediate, take the toxins out of the soil. And so we want to do experiments in a way that I call lab on a cookie sheet. So you can take a cookie sheet and make sure it's clean and kind of sterile and do lab experiments. This grew out of an art project. I want to show you all this because it shows how art is a part of science. So maybe 4 years ago, I worked with teens in California, and they brought in jars when they met each other, a waste material from their home community to feed to mushrooms to see if it would grow. We didn't know if it would grow. Some brought in used coffee grounds, some brought in their Indian tea, some brought in yard waste. We found out that ramen, ramen noodles grew the best. So they made a quilt. So that's what this is. They each made a quilt square, but it was part of their meeting and greeting orientation. So the third one I want to show you is a tool to study the development of roots. And it is also touches upon rituals of gratitude, frugal science tools, and generative learning. This is an interesting project because it's had several iterations. It's having an iteration right now in Hawaii to use a plant that's disappearing. And so I'm going to start with very local, but you can be listening to all of this and thinking about how would it apply to you locally, and then how could it be more global. So here in the United States, the state of Hawaii contains 44% of all the endangered and threatened plants. And today, an announcement came out that we just lost 8 more native bird species. It's really sad. And so what are ways that we can protect our organisms in the future? And it's not just protecting the animals and our plants, it's protecting our storytelling. So I wanted to share this quote here. This is it's a It's a saying here in Hawaii that we'll die if we no longer have willy willy trees, because there's a saying that when willy willy trees blooms, the sharks will bite. So the willy willy trees bloom in October. They bloom now. They're blooming now, and I can collect the seeds. But it's also when the shark mate and the pups are born, and so the sharks are more aggressive. So this is just something that surfers used to know. But we'll learn that knowledge, that local knowledge, if we lose the really important animals. And so this project that's happening here is using these seeds that used to be used for leis, and there's so few of them now, we no longer even make them in leis. We can't, there's not enough. My grandma used to make willy willy seed leis. But now we can collect the ones, the few that are there, and we can grow them. They grow in lava rock, but we designed this project with teens in Salinas, California, where you can study the root growth. And you can see here the second image on the left, you see those balls. They are hydrated with different liquid fertilizers that are homemade. A jar of banana peels put out in the sun. A jar of invasive seaweed put out in the sun for a month and stirred every day. A jar of eggshells cooked overnight. So you can explore what are your local nutrient providing ingredients to create fertilizers that help your plants. Then when you add water to these beads that are hydrated with these fertilizers, the refraction index is the same as water and the beads disappear and you can see the root. So the one on the second to the right, you can see the root growing into the lava rock and it looks like it's suspended in air. I just thought that was really cool because normally they're growing in lava rock and that's how they anchor themselves. And on the right is a willy willy tree growing in my yard in a pot. So this project was co-designed with teens who are migrant labor, children of migrant agricultural laborers. They're mostly indigenous Oaxacan from Mexico. They come from a lot of cultural knowledge, place-based knowledge. And so this was an opportunity for them to talk with their parents and grandparents about what they used to use for fertilizers and still do, even though their parents work in massive American big ag, where it's just monocropping. So there's an opportunity for them to talk differently about past practices. And then they were able to plant, you see the far right, inviting in the museum space, milpa seeds. And milpa seeds is a traditional way of growing beans, corn, and squash together to support each other, both structurally in growth, but also in nutrients. And again, this is a multi-generational activity, low cost, a way to observe root growth and really think about that 80% of the plant that we do not see and that's underground. And besides animals that we see that are disappearing, we also have soil microbes that we are losing. We know more about outer space than we do about the organisms in our soil. They also did this workshop in their own community, so not just in the museum, but the museum provided funding for them to do this in their community park. So the last project I want to show is very much centered on play and sustainable energy. So in Hawaii, we import 90% of our energy. So we import 90% of our goods. We import 90% of our food and goods, and we import 80% of our energy. So it's just really an unfortunate situation right now. But we can go back to past practices and blend it with modern. So here is an example of exploring a playful activity. So here's just the data on changing the lens on this very depressing data. Okay, so we import all this. How do we change that? So perhaps we can make little robots that move using a pager motor that vibrate your phone. So your phone, when it vibrates, there's a little motor in there. And you can purchase those and wire them up to small little solar panels. And if you have a light enough body to it and low enough friction, you can make a little vehicle that moves or a little dream creature. And what if we use only locally sourced materials, such as the grasses that perhaps you braided your hair with, or the clay and dry it that you worked with as a child? Here in Hawaii, I've been doing this with elders and youth to develop a accessible locally based kit, because right now also our science kits are all imported from the mainland, and we really want to explore how can we have a Hawaiian focused exploration. And so on the far left here, you can see the basic components. Everyone gets a pager motor, the bottom little object in bottom left. Everyone gets a solar panel. You just twist the wires together properly, and you attach it to this base at the top. It's little slivers of bamboo. And then in a salad bar style, you collect other materials that we gathered around my neighborhood, local natural materials, and you build your little robot. And we also looked at Indigenous Hawaiian artists who are thinking of bringing their Hawaiian culture into dreaming biofutures. And so I invite you all to connect with, if you haven't already, the artists in your community who do murals or who are graphic artists, who are taking cultural vocabulary, visual vocabulary, and putting it into dreaming the future, because it really helps teens feel empowered through their culture to see, yes, it's not just Western lens, Star Wars themed, focused, sterile future dreaming. We can do it with biology. We can have these really sustainable visions of what our communities and future can be. And it's exciting and it's fun and it's not depressing. And it's something you can keep thinking about. And so how do we share this making knowledge through maker spaces? I know you all are doing that already. As we mentioned, we talked about storytelling. I also want to highlight slow making. I work a lot with biology, and biology for human timescale is slow. So we need to also slow ourselves down in our maker spaces. How do we create them to be spaces where we breathe and where we breathe with biology at their time pace? I have play here, multi-directional learning, which I know you already do, focus on materials of place, rituals of gratitude, and I put a question mark at the bottom for you to think about what else you think should be brought in as a way to share the knowledge. And then actions. So who are the local partners that you can partner with in your spaces? What are traditional crafts that can be brought in into your maker spaces? Crafts are so important, and I'm working with Lahala weavers here for some of the science projects. We're trying to weave the mycelium netting that we're going to put in the soil, so it can be used for actual science practice, but it's also a value in itself. And who are the organisms we can collaborate with? And what are the challenges and maybe ethical questions? How do we start having these conversations within our communities? But we all have really important local organisms that we can collaborate with locally. And then identify ancestral and cultural practices to uplift. You find those by bringing craft into your maker spaces as a serious and thoughtful practice. And all those, I'll just go back one more, will bring trust and time. So those are really key components to have in a makerspace. You need to build trust, and to build trust, you need time. A lot of the community spaces I work with are very accustomed to people popping in and popping out, just with like grant funding for one workshop, and they're there and they're gone. And I think that's really unfortunate, because it creates a condition where like you really do need to understand how you build trust in a space and how it takes time. And then the last few on here, I think are really like actionable items. So one is, we talked about Julia talked about this before, was local materials library. That's not hard to do. Invite your teams to imagine, okay, we're going to create a materials library. What are the materials of our place? Whether they're natural or not. Things that are not natural can be useful when making. And what are the hyper local climate issues that you have? They all connect to global issues. And then, as we talked about earlier, Olga brought up the importance of failure, and I wanted to bring up peer journals here as part of that, like really evaluating failure as part of the process. And at this point, I want to thank you so much for your time. yeah, how can we use sustainable making to shift practice, right? Like really, I think it's a very powerful thing to make. And people carry with them what they make, but really it's the process and the communion together that is of value. I think all of your stories highlighted earlier, like making with others often. And I think making is about building community. So thank you. Yeah, I'll open up for questions and any thoughts. I know I kind of plowed through that. I hope that was understandable. And I'm gonna stop sharing screen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Corinne. It was really interesting. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts or something they want to raise or share? Arpina, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one question to understand better. These labs that you have, Corinne, are they part of the normal schools? I had an impression that you have a space which is quite well equipped, but maybe I'm wrong. I would like to understand like what kind of a space
Yes,
it is and
that's,
like how do you operate?
thank you for that. That's a really great question. I work in my garage. I've always run a garage makerspace. I now have a little shed in my yard, but I am hyper DIY, hyper place-based. I work in community gardens. I straddle museums. I'm kind of a connector, so I can leverage resources in different places. So I will collaborate with universities so I can have access to certain tools and knowledge and collaborate with, amazing people to work with amazing people in the community spaces as well. But my physical space is my kitchen table, my garage, and my makerspace in my yard. And I think it's really important you ask that because making can happen, important making can happen anywhere. I have led teams in the Global Biodesign Challenge. I might find that as a link to share with you all. But it's a global challenge for universities and high schools. And I had teams working in my garage win. They beat out universities from all over the place. And it wasn't because of the tools they had, because they obviously didn't have the same tools. It was because of the questions they were asking, how they were storytelling, and the making journey they developed. So that's a really great question. Yeah, my makerspace is my lanai garage. I have an open air garage, and yeah, I do have some tools though. I usually have a laser cutter. I don't have one now, but I just got a grant to get one. I have drill press. I have 2 3D printers. But I'm really focused more on natural materials and kind of biology lab experiments that you can do on a cookie sheet. My link shows some of those. Any other questions? I'm so grateful for that question. That was really good.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the answer.
Yeah, any other thoughts or questions? Fanny?
Yeah, I have a quite silly question, maybe about the mealworms. Like,
oh yeah,
are you buying those, or how are you sort of like getting like your hands on the mealworms? Are they sort of being everywhere, or is it very like Hawaii?
No, that was done in California, and so I actually got those. Yes, I can put the links in. A pet store. So a lot of reptiles eat mealworms. It's a very convenient food and protein for lizards. So if you go to, at least in the United States, if you go to a pet store, there's a refrigerator section. And if you open that refrigerator section, there's little bins of mealworms that are alive. And that is where I get my mealworms. Oh, thank you, Julia. But that's a great question, Fanny. Yeah.
Did you have any other questions, Fanny? I think we discussed some together.
Yeah, I just want to like, if no one else wants to go. Yeah, I have a question about how are you getting youth sort of interested? Like, how are you approaching them? Are you approaching the youths, or are they? Yeah, how are you getting youths interested in making?
Yes.
And yeah.
Question. So one great lever has been the biodesign challenge, and I put that as a link in the chat. And similar NASA challenges. So in the United States, there's different types of innovation challenges that teens like. So anytime there's anything that has NASA attached to it, they're excited about it. So I guess I get youth interested in things with these very future thinking questions. And then open-ended questions. So I like the biodesign challenge. It's expensive to join, so I use a lot of their resources without doing the challenge sometimes. I'll share it with the youth. Inviting them to see themselves as problem solvers, and then giving them time to play with different materials. So I guess I can show you another example. Okay, so I'm just going to throw in this link here. We'll give you an example. So really getting them to feel valued as innovators, I think, is a key. So I'll have an open house. So I usually start with the open house. Hey, come, we're going to make Christmas ornaments. Or come, we're going to decorate cookies that you can take with you. And then while they're there, they're coming to learn about the program. And then sometimes some of the programs I run, I have to also have, we talked about this, Fanny and Julia, like youth care for younger siblings. Because if I'm engaging with girls, middle school girls, sometimes there's a conflict that they need to be watching the younger siblings, and it's hard to engage them, especially with the youth that I'm working with that are from like Vietnamese or Mexican families, like, it's just that's how the structure is. And so if I can design these meet and greets and let parents know that there's also going to be programming for the younger ones, then I can get students in the program. Another thing that I build into it is always a presentation or engagement to their community where they're leading a workshop in their community. So even if there's another goal, like they're entering some challenge or something, really the goal is to present to the community. That's really in the end what they the validation is from. I write lots of grants to enable me to do the projects that I do, and I partner with a lot of different organizations to bring to life the projects that I want to do. So that's kind of my model. But that's a really good question, how to get them involved. And I think it's just having a space too where they feel like it's theirs and they can keep coming, and then they can start driving the direction. Like, what do you want to do? What should we be doing in here? That kind of agency rather than top down, I think is really important. And I only, in terms of the challenges that I do, I only engage them in challenges that have kind of these big question challenges, and then they drive down to the specific topic they want to do. But that's when I was operating in California. Now that I'm in Hawaii, we have some really deep problems. Like, we just lost a whole community from fire. Like, it's just gone off the face of the earth. So how do you help the grieving students explore making as part of the grieving process? It's a challenge. I'm gonna have to think on that question more, Fanny. That's, yeah. And I think it's, there's some universals and there's some things that are different place by place, right? Yeah. Also give stipends. That's another thing. That's why I write grants. I stipend the teens, because if they're co-designers, they're going to be paid, right? Like, I want to give them money for their efforts. And that's another thing I always bring up with the museums I work with. Traditionally, in the United States, museums have volunteer internships, and that creates a pathway where it's only high resource youth can go into the museum world or into research world. So since I write grants, I tell them, I know you can write in a line item to pay a stipend to the teens. You have no excuse. You're the one writing these grants. build in stipends. And so that's also been another part of my journey in like trying to create sustainable spaces. I worked in a community biolab in Salinas that I helped build out. We were always in conversation with museums and universities about this need for teen stipends. If you're going to call them collaborators, and they are collaborators, they need to be compensated.
Great. I saw, Rex, before that you had your hand up. Do you still have some?
Yeah. Yes, I had my hand on. Fun is still part of my question, so I'll just continue. But like, thanks, Fanny, for asking that. So, Karin, thanks for really detailed presentation about making. So, just in the same line where Fanny was talking, I would like to know how you get to build the confidence of young people to be able to get to that space where they can create something, and also maybe more light on how young people can independently come up with their own making ideas and come and share it in your space. I also like to know how that works for you and what are the things that you put in place. I was actually taking note of those things that you're stating and just wanted to go a little bit deeper.
That's a great question. You can't make someone confident, right? How do you create the opportunity for them to feel confident? I think a really great way is to invite them to be curriculum designers for their communities. And then they learn that they're the expert of their community. They already are experts in place of their neighborhood, of the people of their neighborhood. They are the best ones to design workshops for their communities. So when I'm working with youth, usually I'm in the space of bridging art and biology, and biomaterial design. So I experiment a lot with materials. I invite students to play with these materials and to invent their own recipes, to think about how they can engage their community in these conversations. And when they design these programs for their communities with the funding that we get for grants, they assess the success points, the failure points. They become very mature as program leaders, right? So in their creating making experience for their community with a goal objective, I think is really important. And it's a way to empower them, because you can tell someone they're important, their voice matters, but youth will see that when they do workshops in their community. They are the experts of community. That's why universities go into communities. They know the expertise of knowledge is there. It's not, if you want to engage with community, you need to work with people there. And I don't know if you get enough opportunities to lead programming and design it. And they need to also have that opportunity to fail, and then try again in their community. And I think community is a great space of, holding those kind of experiments in programming. But for me, it's always been giving them the chance to lead maker programming and to design it. And sometimes it's for a near peer. So sometimes for a couple grades below them. That's a really easy way to start. Design a workshop for students who are 3 grades below you. And those students are so excited because they look up to the older students, right? And then from there, okay, now design a workshop for multiple grades. Okay, now design a workshop for your community where you have elders and parents and children. And if it's a playful project, it's not really fail, it's iteration. Let's play on this some more, right? So if you can get students into the space of play, in whatever they're designing, I think that's the key. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I just wanted to know your experience of how you do it. So that's really answering my question.
Yeah, I've had a lot of experience. If you look at the links, you'll see, and if you look at my website, I don't want to go deep into my my technical practice, but I think in terms of engaging youth, I also think collaborating with local storytellers in the arts and bringing them in collaboration is really important.
Great, thanks. Any other questions or reflections or, yeah. Did we have something more funny or?
That's it. Yeah, and then I will just quickly share my website. I have two. So here's one. And then if you go to the workshop page, you will see the actual, like a lot of the activities. Oops, it's not pasting. Just 1 second. Sure why. There you go. So here's one of my sites. And feel free to email me as well. I'll put that in the chat. I'm always happy to talk with people. And I'm really interested in just following what you all do. I'm always interested in like learning more about what other communities are doing, because I think while we explore things hyper local, that's at least where I start from. I just think it all has applications globally. And I think another thing that's really wonderful to do, this also answer your question, Rex, is engage youth like you all, our cohort, international cohort. I think that is huge for teens as well, and young adults, to be able to connect and meet in person, but also, you know, on Zoom. I think that's priceless. Like to feel that connection across space, I think that is really, really important. So I think what you all are doing is amazing, and that I know that's part of it as well.
Yeah, and just like ask another question. Maybe it's hard to answer. It's about storytelling and the importance of storytelling. And I'm wondering how you, like, if you want to, like, if you can talk a little bit more about the storytelling part. How are you working with storytelling? You already mentioned the artist part, working together with artists, but are you also working with like traditional media or social media, or like, because there's so much buzz, it's like we are getting these news flash all over, how to sort of like work with storytelling to go through the
That's a great question. So yeah, I mean, I do engage teens and youth in storytelling on social media, but I'm just putting an example here in the link here in the chat. Someone mentioned Legos earlier. I have a project called Floating Kipupa, and it's storytelling through Legos on elevated table where you can build above and below. So all of a sudden you're storytelling on a Lego system that is above and below surface. So what are our spaces of storytelling is really important. It doesn't have to go on social media, but this is like a space that we all can get together. So I saw a need for a space where we could have scientists and community members talk about biological futures. It can be a very scary topic. And I wanted to have a space where indigenous knowledge, cultural knowledge is held at the same level as science knowledge. And when you do play, and if you're using play materials, everyone's knowledge is the same and you can all storytell. This project invited people to create cards, like storytelling cards, playing cards, a deck of cards. Each person created something out of Legos and clay and natural materials. So they were making things out of Legos. And then they also were, I'll go to gallery and share that with you. They were making things out of Legos, blending with clay and natural materials. But then they also were writing their stories. So you can see here, here's into this one. So these are all like Lego creations, but it's using materials of place. And then people are building on these multiple tables. But the thing I wanted to show you is the wall at the back. Let's see if I can get to a picture of that. Okay, so here, using clothespins, I've posted up the pictures of people's creations and their stories about what it is it's dreaming of the future. And they could choose something. This is a cautionary tale. This is a memory to carry forward. This is a tool. So they had buckets to kind of choose from because it's such an open-ended question. You know, what is your dream for the future? But all their stories and dreams go on the same table. And then this table, which you can build above and below, has gone to many community spaces. I've had it in Hawaii. I've had it in Salinas with the ag labor community I work with there. Whoops. So storytelling it can anchor around different things. I don't like always using social media because it just goes, as you say, Fanny, can go into ether. It's a one-hit thing. I just feel like being in communion around something is really important. And so that's why I did the Lego table. It's play, and then you're writing something out. You're taking a picture of what you create. People get so excited, and then they can go visit the collection. I think it's a question I'm always grappling with. You know, how do you storytell? I think that really is the question. I'm glad we're ending on that. Yeah, how do we storytell together, and how do we share space, and how do we elevate local knowledge so we don't have these very prescriptive one-size-fits-all addressing issues and without local voice, and that is so central to sustainability and storytelling from place. So thank you for that question, Fanny, because I'm always grappling with that, and that's like the core question.
Sorry for hard questions, but yeah, really great answers. Thank you for like elaborating on that. And yeah, local storytelling.
Yeah. And sorry, I know we're over time, and I really want to thank you all for holding space with me.
Yeah. No, we're on time. It's fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Corinne. It has been so interesting and very inspiring.
Great. Yeah, I hope you've learned things. I think you have, and gotten some inspiration for Make Something Week. Yeah, if there are no other questions or reflections or anything, I guess we can end this session. But I'm really happy that you said that it's okay if maybe we reach out to you with more questions if something comes up.
Absolutely. And I just put in one more link. I'll put it in the doc as well, but it's a new site that gives credit to Indigenous knowledge. It's a system, it's kind of like Creative Commons. So anyway, I'll put that in the link.
Great. Yeah, and I'll share all the links of all of the links with all of you after the session, so you don't have to save them right now. Like I would really good that you share a lot of yeah, information and things. Yeah, but thank you everyone for joining today, and especially thank you to Corinne. This was really nice, or at least I'm really inspired, and I hope you are too. Yeah.
A wonderful making week.
Yeah. Thank you.
You know, do you want to mention something about next week too, just to like build up on?
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, so the next week's core team meeting, so this meeting next week, we'll have a workshop on making in practice. So we'll have Robert and Mate and Arpine presenting some of the making that they've done at their makerspaces, and then we're going to have a discussion on making ideas and things for Make Something Week. Or do you want to add something more funny on that? No. So please come next week as well. So this was a kind of like a two-step thing. So this was the first thing, and next week we're going to do some more breakout rooms and discussions and come up with some ideas and share ideas and experiences. Yeah, thank you for that, Fanny. So hope to see you there next week, and thank you so much for joining today.
Thank
Bye.
you for the
Bye. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, Corinne.
Thank you.